So thank you all for attending our webinar. This is the third in the series of webinars that we have done about the CMMC rollout. Right now, or at least on last month, the 26th of February, comments went in to the government from the community to let them know what the community felt about the rules, about the CMMC rules. And there are probably 700 or so comments. And the panelists today will talk a little bit about that. But essentially what we want to do is to make sure that the defense industrial base have all the information it needs for this webinar, for the rollout of CMMC. So we are going to look to you to help guide what this webinar will be about. We've got a stellar list of panelists. Robert Ashcraft, who's been in this industry for a while. There's Chris Haigh. There is Kendall. There is Steve Palamara. Together, each individual has a significant amount of experience in cybersecurity across the federal government. Together, this panel has over, that's got to be, don't want to age anyone, but over 100 years of potential experience that you can tap into. So a little bit about each of the panelists. Then what we're going to do next is to ask a poll question just to sense where you are in terms of your CMMC journey, and then go from that. What we expect is to help you to have you help guide the direction that our webinar takes. So Robert is a president of CMMC Solutions, a division of Corporate Visions LLC. CMMC Solutions is dedicated to preparing the defense industrial base for cybersecurity challenges. He has some key patents to his name. His firm has experienced IT auditors and with considerable cybersecurity knowledge. They understand the complexities and inheritance required to pass an assessment. He is also currently an adjunct professor teaching cybersecurity, I guess, techniques to both undergraduates and graduate students. Steve Palamara. Steve has over 25 years of experience in the tech industry with a degree in computer science and mathematics from Purdue University. He's also a very seasoned professional. Over the past 5 years, he has become a leading authority in NIST 800-171 and CMMC compliance. He has collaborated with numerous organizations, helping them navigate the complex world of compliance and cybersecurity. Currently, Steve is serving as channel partner manager for CMMC Fast Track program at Lifeline Data Center. Steve specializes in leveraging virtualization technology to streamline and enhance the CMMC compliance process. In this upcoming webinar, he'll share valuable insight on how virtualization can revolutionize cybersecurity and compliance. Chris Haigh. Chris is CEO of Mercat Cyber, a firm dedicated to cybersecurity and the Department of Defense Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Framework. As a trained aeronautical and astronomical engineer who's complemented his undergraduate work with a law degree, Chris finds the marriage of technology and regulatory policy fascinating. Well, I think that's a wonderful thing because not many of us do.
I can put a lot of people to sleep, but I only
During his 3-decade career, Chris has held roles including Senate policy analyst and chief technology officer for a cybersecurity firm. He has also obtained the highest levels of certifications possible through the Department of Defense CMMC program, including certified CMMC assessor, certified CMMC professional, and CMMC certified CMMC instructor. He is currently among 42 people in the world who can perform certified CMMC assessments. In addition to Chris, who is also on our Kelly, sorry, who is also a panelist that I will talk about in a little while. But Chris has also spent decades as a technical writer, aside from authoring 100 or more patent applications for highly technical inventions. Chris is the name inventor on numerous patents, and has served as a technical writer for Nobel laureates. Most recently, he has been engaged by Microsoft to write their CMMC implementation guide. Now, Kelly Kendall. Kelly is a service-disabled vet of the Marine Corps and the CEO and president of KNC Strategic Services. KNC is a cybersecurity service provider based in Carlsbad, California. They're an authorized C3PAO. Kelly is a certified CMMC assessor with over 30 years of leadership experience, both in the military and in the corporate world. And he brings a unique blend of discipline and strategic thinking and execution of cybersecurity management. His understanding of how to lead teams effectively translates into well-managed, well-executed cybersecurity programs for clients. So, and for most of us on the firm, Kelly is as he indicated, a service-disabled vet, so he has both the experience from the assessor consultant side, and he knows the pain of being a small business owner trying to get certified. So he brings both those experiences to the table. One of the things we want to do first, while the panelists give you a bit of an overview of themselves, is to have a poll to see just where our audience is along the path to certification. But before we start that, a little bit about me. I'm Philip Denny, president of USGovCert. What we do is to provide a tool, a platform for those firms who are interested in certifying, for them to save their certificate, the documentation, the artifacts of their certification journey. So I'll turn it over to Robert to talk a little bit about himself, and then Steve, and then Chris, and then Kelly.
Okay. My right now focus of what I'm trying to do is to help the SMBs, subcontractors of the primes, to where when I go in, I do my assessments a little bit differently because of knowing and working so long with companies, whether, in Sarbanes-Oxley, banking audits, HIPAA, or whatever. The companies really need to get through this fairly quick, and that's where, partnering with Lifeline, we have the CMMC Fast Track, and they're using my interview techniques to where what I do on day one, not only do I do the pre-assessment, but I also do remediation and ongoing compliance. Because I know with users, they probably aren't doing the user review correctly. So that's a remediation item. And I know you do user review, you correct that item, and there's other items as well with that they just need to know the format and everything. So I try to combine the three phases that are currently being done with assessors into one phase, and we shortcut that time frame. Okay, Steve?
Thanks, Bob. And Philip, you already did a pretty good job of describing my background and what CMMC Fast Track and Lifeline was. But as you said, I'm I lead the CMMC Fast Track program at Lifeline Data Centers, and it's a model that pushes out in a compliance as a service method to our Fast Track customers to get them to compliance rapidly within 6 months. And again, Bob had mentioned his methodologies. We bake them into a GRC tool so that we can effectively get these customers down the compliance journey and to complete the compliance journey in that 6-month process. So our virtualization team is working on getting their CUI hosted and set up, whether it's an enclave, the entire company, within our secure private data center, which we own from the ground up through Lifeline data centers. And simultaneously, the CISOs, who both Chris and Robert are part of that, are working with the customers to guide them through this compliance journey to get their policies, procedures, evidence collection, and then knock through the controls to where they're audit ready in 6 months. So that's at a high level the program. I've worked with hundreds of small to medium sized companies, and so it really is for small primes and subcontractors, this solution. And I can tell you that I've worked with the on-premise versus VDI approach. This VDI approach, which we've been working on and delivering for a couple of years now, is much more cost effective, saves money, saves time, and is a defined timeline and defined cost from a contractor standpoint. And that's really what they're looking for. So hand it over to, is it Chris? Yeah, hand it over to Chris.
Yeah, Chris.
Morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I put in the chat box just a few topics that we have, as a panel, discussed over the last few weeks. Some of the things that are happening in the world that directly impact our industry, impact all of us doing space in cybersecurity. This is more of a tickler. If there are some questions about some of these things, we'd love to entertain them, but I'll give you the overview and then welcome seeing where the conversation goes. And likewise, Philip, you introduce everything I could possibly say and then some. So I won't rehash any of that. First link, China is in our U.S. critical infrastructure, period. There's no question. What I think most people are wondering is just how much are they and how long have they been there? And the answer seems to be for years, and we don't even know the full extent. So I want to bring that up because when I teach classes, I'm a certified instructor. When I teach classes, one of the things I bring up is that China has our F-22 and our F-35 on their tarmacs. When we went back to find out how that happened, Boeing, subcontractors, Lockheed, whoever you ask, they don't really know. So things are happening that are above what most people's comprehension of how they're able to infiltrate our systems. Things are happening that we just don't understand or are just starting to observe. And there's a book that I've been reading that I think kind of drives home what we're seeing. There are some different approaches from enemy states and how they come in and wreak havoc on us. China's approach is very much, let's just hang out, listen, steal data. Russia, on the other hand, is more of a bull in the China closet. Let's get in there and just destroy things, blow things up, and ask for big ransom money. China's been doing it in a very, very different way, and we haven't been paying attention, bottom line. Interesting article there to read about, and we can certainly open up an hour-long conversation about that. We've talked previously about the DoD saying, hey, it's really important to us that you be honest when dealing with the DoD, be honest in your SPURS scores, be honest with what you're implementing. And as a sign of the times, there's an article here from Perkins Coie, which talks about, hey, in 2023, guess what? They hit records in fines from the Department of Justice for Lincoln's Law, also known as False Claims Act, for lying to the government. So it's been around since Lincoln's time. That's why they call it Lincoln's Law. The temptation of people to lie to the government and say, I'm going to give you services and take your money, but not do it. Or just lie about, for example, hey, we're doing all these cybersecurity things. Yes, of course. Now hand me that contract. This is nothing to play around with anymore. Prison time's involved, record fines, put your business out of business with one hit. So something to read about, come up to speed with. The third one here is Boeing's being hit by a $51 million fine. Again, data leaks, how you're handling data, critical for everybody here in this call to think about. And we're here to help you walk this, what can be a pretty prickly path, but how can you be compliant and still do business? And then one of the resources out there that I'm starting to point more people to is if you're going down this assessment path sooner rather than later, DIBCAC will be involved, and DIBCAC will be involved if you're a level 3. This is the DIBCAC page with a whole bunch of resources on here's what we're looking for, here's what an assessment will be like. As all of us in the assessor community know, if you're getting an assessment anytime from now until the rule hits full implementation, DIBCAC is our partner. We do the assessments together. So this is a good resource for you that's online that is coming right from the horse's mouth. So meant to start some conversations there, but by all means, let's continue on to Kelly and see where this conversation goes.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everybody. So KNC Strategic Services has been around for a little over 6 years. And as I mentioned, we're out here in the West Coast, the early morning people that wake up too early for East Coast calls, and always cracks me up. I was on one yesterday, 7 a.m., but I'm not going to complain. So we do cybersecurity services, as you mentioned. We really are focused on both government and defense contractors as our primary area that we work in. And so we're working both with the companies trying to get ready for CMMC and have been for several years. And we're on the assessor side as one of the 50, as of right now, authorized C3PAOs. So this is the space we work in. This is the space that we know. And we have helped many clients that are small businesses, some medium businesses. And the biggest thing I can say to anybody is, if you're not started, please, for the love of God, get started. If you are started, you probably already realized this stuff is not easy. Getting fully compliant to be able to pass an assessment is not easy. You can't do it yourself. It's not a DIY thing. You've got to get help from the right people, whether you're doing some internally, some through MSPs, some through consultants, doesn't matter. It's kind of it takes a village approach, and you've got to get the right help. And I can tell as an assessor, I was participating on a joint surveillance voluntary assessment last week. I've seen firms going through an actual assessment, they're getting the right help and the difference it makes. So all I could say is you better have the right people in your corner.
Fantastic. So one of the things that you mentioned, Chris, so that we pick up on this, you talked about Boeing being assessed a $51 million fine. How much of that was passed through to their subs?
I don't think any of it. Did they make mention of that?
No, they actually did, and I think that's probably the point, is the fact that the prime got the levy, and then there was no mention of the subs, but there is certainly the possibility and almost the probability that Boeing will have some kind of ramifications that they'll be addressing to their subs.
I know they said that it was an indeterminate number, is the word they used, of international employees and contractors. So clearly there were some subs involved. But here's what I know the primes are driving and asking for right now. Subs, go get certified now. Don't wait until the rule is final, because when we have a contract that renews, we have to say, and Boeing attests to this, all of our subs are compliant. And if we can't say that, you're not going to be involved. So the primes, like Boeing is a perfect example, are really driving a lot of business right now. They're telling their subs, go get your ducks in order.
And one of the other things that the folks on the line should take into consideration is there are not a whole lot of qualified people to help you make that journey. So those who are good are very busy and very booked up. I know this team is, they're booked way out. So for your own sake, for your own revenue sake, unless you engage with a qualified consultant at this point, you're going to have a hard time qualifying. You're going to have a hard time being able to respond to government solicitations. So for your own sake, for the sake of your company, you should get engaged as early as possible with talented consultants and assessors.
There is a company that's in this space that has a lot more resources than we do, who did a poll of what's the average time to get compliant, and across hundreds of responses, the answer was 12 to 18 months. So for anybody who's saying, let's calculate, okay, the rule will probably become final later this year, most likely before November, because they don't want to wait until after a new election with the uncertainty. You've passed that date. We're way past the 12 to 18 months. If you think I'll get compliant later, it's not a quick lift. The one thing I will say, and this is why we send a lot of business over to Steve's group, if you have a solution that you can use like that, where it's a turnkey solution, instantly compliant, that takes months off your work. But even that still takes several months.
Sure. So we want to take a look at the poll results. First question, has your organization started the CMMC journey? 87% of those who responded said yes, and obviously 13% said no. The next question, is your organization currently ready for CMMC certification? 30% said yes. 70%, actually 71%, 29% said yes, 71% said no. Final question, has your organization achieved CMMC certification? 4% said yes. 96% said no. So that's kind of a survey of the folks who are currently on the call. What do you guys think about those numbers?
Encouraging. That's bigger numbers than I thought. That's great.
So it would seem as though the people who are here are the ones who are tuned into CMMC. So that could reflect the fact that they know that it's coming, they're preparing for it. So our numbers might be skewed by people who are kind of ahead of the curve. Everyone is sitting back waiting to be slammed.
Yeah.
Interesting to me, guys, that we have actually 4%, which doesn't sound like a big number that's certified, but there's 58 that have been certified so far. So 4% of the 70 we have on sounds like 3 companies. So we have 3 of the 58 on this call.
Fantastic. Fantastic. We are, please put any questions you have into the chat, and we will respond to them. One of the things that we talked about in the past is the False Claims Act, and I know Chris touched a little bit upon that. Any indication that that there have been fines, levies, or court or cases launched against individuals who have violated the act in regards to CMMC or NIST?
Yes, one of the most prevalent examples is, and this is an interesting loophole that I think, I won't call it a loophole, there's an interesting way that these cases get started that everybody should understand. If an employee believes that what you're doing was dishonest, the employee can bring a lawsuit on behalf of the government, called a qui tam, and the government can decide if they want to step in at some point and say, yep, there's enough here that we're worried that something happened. I believe it was UPenn that had that exact thing happen earlier this year. One of their employees said they're not following CMMC, they're not following 171 and what they're supposed to be doing. And I can get the link here while we're talking, but in essence, this employee went to the government and said, I have this information, but what you do is you hire a lawyer first, and the lawyer files a lawsuit, and the government just kind of sits and watches. Let's see how this plays out. And then they'll take over at some point if they believe that there's merit here. That's exactly where it is with this UPenn. Again, I'll confirm that in a minute. But this case has been initiated over exactly this these provisions, with the allegation that it's not being followed internally, and an internal employee knows that. And the message, or the takeaway, really is these employees can get compensated by the government. So there's a whistleblower protection as well as compensation from the federal government for doing things like this. And if there's money that's recovered by the government, the employees can actually get a huge take on that. So they get a percentile. What this means for companies is, A, do the right thing, and B, it's time to listen to your employees. If something's going on, and especially when we're looking at very high profile consequences, very damaging things can happen if you're not in compliance with CMMC. It's time to really hold those employee meetings and listen to what's going on. That's one of the biggest takeaways I would offer. And like I said, this is something that, again, falls underneath the False Claims Act, and what is on this at stake there. And again, there's a legal issue here that's fascinating. Most people don't think about. Not only can you be fined, that's a guaranteed, and that's what just hit record numbers. The DOJ has recovered record numbers of fines. B, you can be blackballed from all contracts from now on. C, you can go to jail. And guess what? It's not the typical beyond a reasonable doubt that you think of with criminal law. This is a lower standard. It is a preponderance of the evidence, which is basically a 51% likelihood. If it's 51% likely, and this is a court deciding that, yeah, I think that executive knew exactly what he was lying about, you could get jail time. And it's lower than, you know, the kind of proof they need to have to say you were speeding.
Wow.
It's
Okay.
a preponderance of the evidence is really just doesn't smell right. So this is not something to play with.
And it's I'll add just one quick thing is on the Cyber AB latest town hall that I sat in on. One of the things they brought up was just this, the whistleblower piece, the False Claims Act, and the fact that, I mean, all of these comes from, at this point, it's a SPURS score, right? So it's a SPURS score that's recorded that is not correct or not accurate. And one of the public comments that they pointed to, the Cyber AB, Matt Travis over there pointed to, was that they would like to see give the ability for C3PAOs to come in and audit voluntarily, to do an audit for level 1, CMMC level 1. So that was interesting to me, that even though you only have to self-attest, to have an internal audit done, or an unofficial audit from a C3PAO to basically certify that, yeah, this SPURS score is accurate, is something that can protect you from that. So it's food for thought.
And we highly recommend that. We had, I've mentioned this in previous webinars, but we've had a potential client that contacted us after they got the call that no client wants to get. They got a call from DIBCAC saying, we'd like to come and visit you. Well, what led to that? And it was they submitted a perfect SPURS score. That's great. That's what you want when you get certified, because you've done a great job. That's not what you want to submit on your first time out of the gates and say, yep, we do everything perfectly, because DIBCAC is taking you seriously. They will, and they have the right to, and they will show up at your door and say, I'd like to see how you got to perfect. Just show me. And they'll be gentle if really, you know, you've got the proof. They are not gentle if it's obvious you're just lying. And I think that's being played out over and over right now.
Yeah, I'm wondering how many companies leverage that 6-month POAM period where they can fill that gap after a joint surveillance. You've got 6 months to any shortfall. So I'd be curious to know what that percentage is. I'm guessing high, that very few come in at 110 out of the gate.
Right.
Hey, Steve,
so go
can
ahead.
I point just one thing you mentioned about the JSVAs? Just so you know, when the assessment's done right then, they put in the SPURS score. So the POAM is fixing it, and then they will go and post the revised score. So just so you know, if you go to a JSVA, it's not a pass fail, but they're going to put in immediately whatever the score is right at the assessment. And then after you fix everything, originally they hadn't said they would, but we pushed and they were able to agree. Yes, after that 6 months, you get everything fixed, you get reassessed, then they will update or put a new score in for you.
And just to be clear, it's not a really black and white, hey, most companies are going to be able to have 6 months to fix things. There are some requirements that if you don't have them at the day of the assessment, you're done. So go to the back of the line, pay for the assessment again. It's absolutely critical that you get somebody who's very trained in this space to give you guidance, because if you show up and you have one of those factors, and there are numerous that are 5-pointers required by the DoD, we have to see this or you do not pass, then it's all on you. You go to the back of the line. We're talking about 6 months wait before you can even get another assessment and pay for it, just like you went through the first time.
Wow, that's something to be considered. There are a lot of small government contractors who they will go through the motions of going after CMMC. They think they'll do the self-assessment and not necessarily think they'll do it as a small business simply because they were told by the prime to get on our vehicle. This is what you need to do. For example, if you are a staffing company that you supply people to Boeing or some other cleared program. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of of going the extra step and verifying that you do not have that you potentially have the need to bring in someone, an MSP to help you out or something to that effect? It isn't. They need to take this a little more seriously than going through the motions. Or anyone else who wants to respond.
Yeah, I would just say briefly that we do work with a lot of MSPs and as external service and we're also an MSP. So we're providing tier 1 through 3 support for their Active Directory services within our cloud with their virtual desktops, virtualized servers. So we're providing that same level. And if you have an MSP today, they are required to be at the same level that you are as a subcontractor. So, not only for cloud, from a cloud perspective, but from an on-premise perspective.
One of the things that it seems that there might be difficulty in achieving is there don't seem to be any place where you can go as a small business to see someone's certification level or your MSP certification level. So how do you get around the fact that the government doesn't publish that information for obvious reasons? How do you assess whether or not your MSP is qualified to do the work that they indicate that they're going to do for you?
Yeah, you want me to take that?
Anyone, sure.
Well, I just at a high level, there's only 50. There's less than 60 companies that are certified today. So pretty much no MSP has been certified because there is a priority given to companies that are working directly with the DoD, that they're on a contract, that they have. So there's certain stipulations that just get you from a priority standpoint even scheduled for a joint surveillance audit. And most, if not all, MSPs would not even meet that today. So they're not going to be certified. So it's really you just having a conversation with your MSP. Do you know what CMMC is? Do you know what 800-171 is? And so at this stage, it's more of and even get your RPO, your registered practitioners. If you're using them today as a consultant, get them to have a conversation with them as well to see how seriously are you? Do you have defense contractors as customers? So those types of questions are just at a high level what I would do, just to kind of qualify your MSP and see if they aren't certified or if they say, well, we're covered, just drill down a little bit further. Well, what are you guys doing? Are you 800-171 compliant? Are you working towards compliance? Those types of questions.
Okay.
Great. Also, you want to see, since there are so very few that are certified, see if they have any other certifications. Are they going through ISO? Do they have a SOC 2? because then if they've gone through and are going through consistently those other certifications, CMMC is just another certification for them. They're already somewhat ready for it. There are some particulars with CMMC they have to be concerned about, but basically, you know, the firm knows what a regulatory environment is. They know what they're going to be going through, and it's going to be a lot easier for them to prep and acquire that certification.
And that's a good point, Bob, that even the Cyber AB pointed out another public comment, which is that that MSPs that already met, or external service providers that have been ISO 27001 certified, it's basically would be viewed as equal to CMMC level 2, and they would not have to go through certification. So that was a suggestion or a public comment that was made as well, and pointed out by the Cyber AB.
We had a great question about level 2 versus level 3.
Yeah, all right.
We want to get into that a little bit.
Yes.
Kelly, you want to take that? I know you already started a response there.
Yeah, it's a really good question of, when do I know? I mean, I think that's the biggest question that many OCs are asking is, when do I know? When do I know what I need? When do I know when to get it? When do I know what I have to have? When do I have to have it by? That's one of the biggest questions. And the reality is, when the government implements this and phases it in, when it's going to go into a procurement, they have to follow a specific process. One of those processes is doing a request for information in the beginning. They've noted that that's when they're going to be putting out what they're expecting for the RFP, all the different details. And so that's when they're going to be stating, for this, we expect the prime, to be level 2, because it's typical CUI stuff, not high risk. Or they might put in that level 3 requirement. So you'll have an idea, one, from the RFI before the RFP even comes out. And then 2, once it comes out, you still have time, because you technically don't have to be certified when a bid comes out. You have to be certified to win the award. However, if you think realistically about how bids work, if you're that contracting officer making the decision on who's going to win the bid, and one of them already has their CMMC done and one doesn't, who do you think they're going to pick?
Yeah.
So it's in your best interest
it.
to have it before you submit a bid.
Right. The other thing on this is that, let's say the contract is a level 3. It doesn't necessarily mean the entire contract is level 3. There could be portions in that are level 1, level 2. And those portions can be directed, or maybe a sub that they have may only be working with that level 2 section of the level 3. So the subs don't necessarily have to be level 3. It depends on what's declared within the contract.
And even their estimations, if I remember the numbers right, it's roughly they're estimating over the course of these 5-7 years, 1,500 contracts, a little over 1,500, if I remember right, they expect to be level 3. So it's not going to be a large amount. That's going to be a very small amount.
Correct. Yes. Yes. And plus, they have to be level 2 certified before they can go and get level 3 certified.
Yep.
It's fantastic. I know that many of the panelists are entered comments for the comment period. Have you guys looked to see what is the trend in the comments that were being asked? And do you expect that those comments will reflect in any changes to the final rules?
That's a good question too. There was a little bit of an uproar with the rule plus the FedRAMP memo, as a lot of us are calling it, but the rule came out, and then just a few days later, the memo from the Department of Defense was released that said, let's clarify something everybody's been asking. What does it mean to be FedRAMP equivalent? And the way they clarified it is you have to score a perfect score. It's which is not even being done if you go through the normal FedRAMP process. Most of the people who go through normal FedRAMP are given exceptions because the government agency says we really need to use XYZ product. So we understand if they have a 95 score or whatever. that's less than perfect. FedRAMP said, well, if there's no agency attached to it and you need to get FedRAMP approved so you can provide services to the DIB, you got to get a perfect score. Blew people away. A lot of people got upset. I submitted a comment on that. I do expect clarity on that. One of the reasons I do is because David McCune, who is at the DOD, said, yeah, and was on the memo. Yeah, I understand that memo upset a lot of people. So he clarified in late January that we are going to kind of fix that misinterpretation. We didn't mean, and then I think he also may have conflated some things. Then he started talking about 171 instead of FedRAMP. So I don't really know exactly where they're going to end in this. I can't predict it based on what I've read, but something is going to change because the way it stands right now, I think the vast majority of us would agree, it makes it so hard to provide a cloud service to the DIB. We just lost on a lot of options and we're probably less safe because of that. And that was the argument I made in the comment. If you make it impossible for 98% of the cloud service providers, especially those providing security services to the DIB, we don't have options. Now what do we do?
Okay. There's a question on there. So the primes are able to tailor or not flow down certification requirements. I think he's probably going like if it's a level 3. If it's a level 3, they're within the prime, they're going to have, believe me, a committee going through that agreement or the contract to figure out sections of the contract and what level are each section, so that when they go to get the subs to supply whatever part, service, or whatever for that area, they must have whatever that section of the contract is set at, whether it's level 1, 2, or 3 with it. So believe me, the primes do their due diligence to make sure that they have the appropriate level contractor coming in and doing that work.
Sure.
The short answer, though, they are required to flow down. So just
Yeah.
the really quick, straight answer is yes, they absolutely are required to flow down. It's just how that flow down and what it will be.
Right.
So when they flow down, so is that at the prime's discretion, or does the government say this is level 3 throughout? Or I got the impression
that's the
that
government writes the contracts.
Sure. So then when the committee sits down, the government has already determined, hey, this is going to be level 3, this is going to be level 2, this is going to be level 1. Okay.
Right.
Well,
Yeah. What they're doing, they're sitting down with that contract and they'll go back to the contract writer to get clarifications on certain areas on it. If they read it and they can't exactly figure out in that section the level and why it's required or whatever, they'll work together with them to get that answer.
Fantastic.
Another way to think about this is level 1 and level 2 are about the type of data. Level 3 is about the risk of the data. It's a much riskier contract that they're working on, therefore higher controls needed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Fantastic.
And there will be some subcontractors, and I think this goes back to the committee discussion. There will be some subcontractors that are not getting the most sensitive information. Maybe they're just supplying sandwiches to the troops. Well, that probably is only a level 1.
Yes.
But as soon as you start getting into the CUI, the technical drawings, you're going to immediately bump up to level 2, and those subs are going to have the flow down requirements for level 2.
Correct. With that. There's a question, have there been any change to the CMMC controls in the new rule, or do we still follow the old assessment guide? Well, right now we follow the old assessment guide, and when the new ruling come out, we'll see what changes they made with it. What's the feeling as far as, okay, they're going to come out with a new ruling, and I guess, will they declare when those new changes, if there's some subtle changes to any of the controls? Is there a date or something, or when it is released, that's the date you have to follow the new final guidance at that point?
Chris, you want to take that?
Yeah.
Yes.
My understanding is that when the rule goes into effect, again, we're speculating, but likely before the end of the year, likely before November elections, then at that point, it's built into contracts as exactly that rule reflects. So the assessment guide, they did update a little bit. No significant changes that I think merit discussion, but assuming that the DoD sticks with something that's not significant changes, because they'd have to start the whole rulemaking process over again if there are significant changes. Let's assume, because I think everybody knows national security is a huge consideration. Let's get this through. We can make changes and updates later. If that happens, it's going to be very minor changes compared to what we know now. And it's going to go to Congress. Congress, because they asked for this in the first place, we expect them to say, sounds great. They have the opportunity at that point to vote and say, no, we didn't want this CMMC rule. Nobody thinks that's going to happen. So basically, Congress sits on it and says, fine. President, as OIRA has a chance to weigh in one more time, and we already know they weighed in. So we expect this to go through almost exactly with what we have right now.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. This is for my lack of depth in this field, as I don't have nearly as much experience as you guys. Now, when the final rule comes out, is there an equivalency between the NIST 800-171 and level 1 of CMMC? Will NIST remain a requirement once this final rule is in place?
You open an awesome can of worms. I love it. I personally love it. Again, I can put people to sleep. So it is all based on NIST 171. Level 1 has already been defined as these 17 controls in NIST 171, which are also found in the FAR clause, which, by the way, is 15 controls in the FAR clause, but they somehow multiplied by the time they got to 171. So 17 controls in 171 are level 1. That I don't see that changing. Level 2 goes up to 110 controls. That is changing. What is happening as we are having this webinar is NIST is coming out with revision 3 of 171. Well, what the DoD said is, you know what, we're going to bake into the rule, and this was new in the rule, we're going to literally refer to revision 2 for now. So in the proposed rule on December 26th, it says revision 2 of NIST 171. But there is an acknowledgement that at some point, DoD is going to say, yeah, we need to be fluid. We need to continue to keep up with cybersecurity threat vectors, what's happening in this world. That's why NIST came out with a new revision. And guess what? It's got some more controls in it. So we don't know exactly where that's going to land, but it's going to be more controls. When NIST finishes up in the spring, it's the DoD's turn to say, when do we want to adopt all these new rules into 171? So 171 is intentionally by design fluid. And as NIST continues to update it, we expect the DoD to pull that into the CMMC requirements. But as it stands right now, revision 2 is the law of the land.
Okay, great, great. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna kind of cue something. You might have been going to this anyway, Philip, but just in case you didn't or weren't, I was going to cue something up for Kelly to address. We had spoken about this in the past, but I think it'd be helpful to yeah, Kelly or Chris, but I'm thinking that kind of the same conversations that we had regarding how to engage with a C3PAO, and you could just use a general or your specific way of engaging, getting started, what it takes, and what that journey looks like to the joint surveillance audit. That would be nice to hear.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd be happy to discuss that. So the first step when you're engaging with the C3PO, one, probably because I'm having it happen to us, you're probably going to go out and get quotes from 2, 3, 4, 5, however many you want to, interview, talk to them. Things you want to look for is, one, do they understand your core technology? Are you an Apple shop and they have no Apple experience? Are you Microsoft and they don't somehow, I can't imagine that happen, they don't know Microsoft, AWS, whatever it might be. One, you want to make sure that they understand your technology. That's going to help. But the process essentially is engaging into a contract with that C3PO for an assessment. They're going to provide you an estimate or a fixed rate if they do that. And you'll have an idea then of what's going to happen. The first steps are a readiness assessment. This is when you go to a C3PO when you're ready to be assessed. So the assessment readiness, the readiness assessment we have to do, it's not a gap assessment. It's basically checking on within a month, you're going to be at an assessment. Do you have your ducks in your row? Do you have the team identified? Do you have the things ready that are going to be needed? So it's not reviewing evidence. It's not checking everything. It's an assumed that those things are already done. So it's a more simplified readiness assessment, so to speak. You go through that. We submit then to the Cyber AB, which passes it on to the DIBCAC team. Here is a candidate for Joint Surveillance Voluntary Assessment. They pass it on, DoD gets it, DIBCAC team gets it, and then it goes into this, I don't know, black hole, ethereal place where it lives, where we have no idea what's going on until the DIBCAC team communicates to you as the OSC. One problem we're having is the communication is challenging because you have 4 bodies involved. So DIBCAC is going to communicate directly to the OSC. The OSC passes that information to their C3PO because the C3PO is going to keep bugging them all the time saying, have you heard from them? Have you heard from them? That's what we do. Because we get no communication directly from DIBCAC, they are talking to the OSC, which is understandable. So then DIBCAC lets the OSC know, okay, this is your date. It's not a, here's 14 dates, pick one, put some time on your calendar. It comes back and says, okay, this is your date. You said you're ready. Here's your date for your assessment. And that's when a lot of the heavy work starts, once they know that, because then all of the documentation you start getting ready and get uploaded so that it can get reviewed ideally the first week before your actual assessment week. And I just went through one last week on a joint surveillance voluntary assessment. The week before, I spent, I think, about a total of about 7 hours going through all of the documentations, all of the evidence, all of the screenshots. And the advantage to that one is if you have your ducks in a row and you have your evidence ready, and you have it identified by the actual NIST control. This is a little tidbit to help. If you have a document that's going to be an artifact, very first part of that file name should be 3.1.1a or whatever it applies to. Organize your evidence like that. You're going to make someone really happy, and it's going to speed up your assessment because it makes it so much faster for us to find the evidence. Have a folder for that family or for that control. So that's just a little extra tidbit I'm going to share there because it's really helpful. That's the bulk of the process.
Philip, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, that was fantastic. So and obviously customers are starting to call. Earlier in the discussion, I think Steve talked about the total timeline, or someone talked about the timeline. I know that working with a qualified MSP can shorten that timeline. And what is typical for going through the assessment for someone who is working with a qualified MSP versus someone who's trying to do this on their own? Anyone want to take a shot at that in terms of time saving and even money, if you feel comfortable talking about the cost level?
Well, one thing is that, and I even see it within the CMMC world and others regulatories too, is an example is if you're in finance and in IT auditing, the certification you get is through ISACA, it's a CISA. And you have to be an auditor for 3 years before you can get that certificate. Now with CMMC, that's not the case. So as people come into it, they may know security, but they really know audit? Because audits how you prep the client. Audits how you do the documentation. There are many fine things that I got beaten up early on from the PwCs of the world that I learned my lesson well, so that now when you go and present the client to this C3PAO. The old story that I was always given by my teachers was your work papers should stand on their own. They should not have to come back and ask you a question. That's what you want to aspire to, but typically if you have some questions, that's fine. But you want to make sure your documents and what you write up tell the story of the business and how compliant they are.
Great. Great. How
Chris,
many?
I think you'd have some good backup to that too, and Kelly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would emphasize what I think is being said in several different ways here. Documentation is king. More people fail their assessments from documentation than anything else. If you don't have policies for everything, if you don't have everything documented that you're doing, if your audits aren't going back at least 6 months, you're gonna have a hard time. You need somebody to come in there and do a deep dive with you to see what you have so far, what you need to improve, so that when the assessor comes, and I love the way Kelly said, you know, make it organized by the control. Absolutely agree. When that assessor comes, you want them to say, this is gonna be easy, right? Because we've got everything documented, easy to find, and it makes sense. And another thing we suggest is in your SSP or some of your other documents, have hot links to where other evidence is or other documents are, so that they can look at your SSP, which, by the way, if you guys don't know what an SSP is, you need to hire somebody. Required, absolutely required, system security plan. And that should be extremely comprehensive with a whole lot of information that you'd be scared if somebody actually got a hold of it, but they won't, because you're going to keep it secure. And that's what we like to build out with all kinds of links and evidence. And this is exactly how we implement everything. And if you go to the web and search for an SSP, which is exactly what that company did that I told you submitted a perfect score and said they said they had an SSP, the DIBCAC came back and said, we can't even accept your SSP. We're not even going to show up at your facility until you improve your SSP. So documentation, 100%. One of your first things you're going to have to pay attention to with your team that will guide you.
And one of the things you said earlier, Chris, was some failures in the assessment you get 6 months to fix. And depending on the failures, there are others that just, puts you at the back of the line and you've got to start all over again. For a small business, to having to put that money out there twice is very difficult.
Yes, I would recommend it to nobody. Don't go in blind, get your first assessment and count it as a lesson learned. You need to get a team that is highly educated, and there are unfortunately a lot of people out there claiming they have some CMC knowledge. Go to CyberAB and confirm that they're on there and they have some certification, some knowledge in this space, otherwise run away. But once you find somebody that has a good education, you need to hire them. It's going to be more than worth your money, because you won't have to go through this 2-3 times and won't be blindsided when DIBCAC says we'd like to visit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. We've got 2 minutes left. Any final thoughts that you want to share with our audience?
I'll start just with to pile on the organizational aspects. Yes, it's critical. There are some really good GRC tools to help organize and to help make the assessor's job much easier. And the one we use is customized for our fast track solution, but then also it makes the C3PAO's job easier. You give them a seat, they go through the evidence, it's organized. I'll leave you with that piece.
Yeah. One thing, continuous compliance will keep your documentation, at least part of it, up to date. Plus, it shows a good history tracking that you are continually trying to be compliant, not just if someone comes in and, okay, we're all set, we're all ready, but it's going to be 9-10 months until the C3PAO comes in with it. So you got to make sure your documentation is fresh. So continuous compliance is best way to keep up with that, but you got to make sure when the C3PAO comes in, you don't have any old artifacts.
Excellent. Any final words from Kelly or Chris?
Nope. I'll be respectful of our noon
Yep,
cutoff.
Yep.
noon time.
Thank you,
Same.
guys.
So thank you very much, guys. We are going to make
Mhm.
this available and the contact information for our esteemed panelists in an email to everyone that registered. And again, thank you for your time, and you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.
Great
Very good.
questions, guys. Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye-bye.